vitriolic metal quartet Vexed are one of England's most fearsome bands. They released their sophomore album in June this year and produced one of the darkest records of 2023. Kirk Horton talks to vocalist and lyricist Megan Targett and guitar prodigy Jay Bacon about the band's latest LP, Negative Energy. This is an SBR exclusive interview. So you've released your sophomore album, Negative Energy, 23rd of June on Napalm Records. And like your debut album, you start this with track number 1 called PTSD. And this is just a short intro or instrumental. Why did you decide to start the album with another instrumental?
So it's quite a good way to set the tone for the whole album, you know, and it's a good way of kind of easing people in, but in a really heavy way, you know, by almost giving them like a little taster. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's a good way to get people's energy up when they're listening straight off the bat, you know, because they don't have to get a song in, they don't have to like listen to half a track. They just got this short little intro that's really heavy, sets the tone for the rest of the album, and you can kind of get an idea sort of what you can expect from the rest of the album, you know, because it immediately straight off the bat it sets the heavy tone, it sets the energy, and it captures a lot of what the album kind of brings.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Jay. I think whenever I've listened to like other artists and they just sort of jump straight in with a song, I find it, I mean, it's great, it works, but I find it a little bit jarring. Like I'd rather have an intro to an album. Bands like Amur always do it. King 810, they always do it, and it just sets. It's almost like like a storyboard, you know. It's like a narrative, a narrator, sort of saying, "This is the world that you're about to go into, and this is the atmosphere and the vibe." And then you can drop in to your first proper song. And I just think it's a nice way of like Jay said, getting a taster of it and easing the listener in instead of just diving straight in on the first track.
I can see why, because we come to track number 2, which is clearly already a classic, isn't it? I know that this is going to be in your live set list for the rest of your career. We're talking about track number 2, Anti-Fetish, fascinating song. So there's 2 things I want to ask. First, Jay, I want to ask you, what the hell are you doing on that guitar? I wouldn't be able to do those kind of technique. What are you actually doing where you're doing like those dive bomb noises? That's so weird.
So like we'd tease the idea of like using like pitch altering and stuff like quite a lot, but it's something that it can either sound really good or really forced and quite tacky, you know. So we were quite like, we wanted to be sparing with it, and we wanted to be like really careful where we used it. So the initial opening riff and closing riff for Anti-Fetish, it didn't have any pitch alterations, and it was quite a lot different, but it wasn't hitting the spot. So we kind of we messed around with like using the pitch whammy and stuff, like not, you know, kind of half expecting it to work, and then like, you know, heard the whole thing together and it's like, oh shit, that actually sounds like really interesting, and works really well with the rest of the track. And you know, it's quite fun for me as well, because I'd never done anything like pitch altering live. So especially when we do it live, it's a new for me. It's something fresh for me to do as well, and it just sounds really effective as well. It's super erratic, which is what makes it, I think.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And Megan, we're gonna have to talk about these lyrics. I'm
Let's
bored. This ain't a competitive sport. Next question, please. I know exactly what you're talking about, and we'll come on to that. Can you explain to the viewer what you mean by this song?
This song encapsulates what it is like to be a woman in the metal community, a woman in the music industry. You know, most of the interviews I had when we were doing Culling Culture was, so, you know, what do you think of Tatiana and Courtney? Like, did they inspire you during this? And both of those vocalists are incredible. They are talented. They're lovely people. Neither of them inspired me. What's it got to do with my music, my writing? Like, I take inspiration from David Gunn. I take inspiration from CJ McMahon from Thy Art Is Murder. Like, just because I'm a girl doesn't mean that every other girl on the planet influences me. And then it extends to, you know, the trolling and the hate. Like, every single music video that we'd put out on Culling Culture was she's shit in comparison to Tatiana. She's not as fit as Courtney. She's not as beautiful as Alyssa from Arch Enemy. And it just became this like competitive, fetishized thing where every time you put a bit of content up online, you're put in this order and this hierarchy of who's the hottest and who's the most talented. And I was so sick of it by the end of the like culling culture run. I just wanted to write about it. And luckily I have a really thick skin now and it doesn't bother me at all. And when we do get comments like that, I find it quite funny. Like I got told to get back in the kitchen the other day and it really did make me laugh. We were really chuckling. But like for girls that are starting out, putting, and for anyone starting out, it's so off-putting. So yeah, I just wanted to write about, just be very transparent and just be, we're not a novelty, we're not a thing to be fetishized, and go fuck yourself, basically.
I'm just going to read out a quote. So we did an email interview 2 years ago, Screen Blast Repeat with you, and this stood out for me. So even I'm guilty of that. I was like, oh, what do you think if you're going to be compared with Ginger? This is what you said. And I learned so much from this. You said, no matter what label we were signed to, people are always going to compare women against other women in metal. Unfortunately, there is still this very toxic mentality with a lot of metal fans where there can be only one female vocalist and all others are inferior in comparison. There is unlimited space for women who want to be in bands, and we are not in competition with one another. That was so poignant. I realized that I've been doing this. Because
I'm glad it was poignant. Yeah, cool.
I mean, like, if a new deathcore band comes out, we're not like, oh, fucking hell, he's nowhere near as good as the singer from Whitechapel or CJ from They Art Is Murder. It just doesn't happen, does it? So before we move on to the next song, this is another thing that made me look at it from the perspective. Let's say you've done 40 interviews this album cycle. How many of those interviewers have been women?
Oh, God. To be fair, I've had quite a few interviews from women this time round. And a lot of them have been really fun and talking about, like, they've kind of just turned into conversations instead of interviews because we've all kind of related and talked about the shit that we all have to put up with. Whereas the first album, maybe one. I don't actually remember if there was any women that interviewed me. So yeah, it's a stark contrast compared to the first album.
Yeah, the reason I ask, because let's look at it from my perspective. If I'm in your shoes and I have 40 interviews and everyone interviewing me as a woman, I would probably be a bit taken aback. So I think we probably take it for granted, don't we? That just do the interview, have you ever had that feeling? It's like, okay, got another interview. It's going to be another man interviewing me. Has that ever been an issue with you?
No, never been an issue. I'm pretty, I don't know. I don't ever think about gender and I don't ever think about male versus female until it's brought up in that kind of context. Like, which is why I find it so bizarre that there is this weird hierarchy that women are put on when it comes to being a vocalist. It's just really weird to me. Like, all my inspirations and my heroes are men. All my favorite vocalists are men, and like that's for no reason other than they just happen to be, So it's just not something I've ever thought about. But it is nice to see more women sort of coming and doing the interviews. I did see an interview schedule come up from female fronted something, and I was like, I checked to see who was doing the interview, and it was a woman, and I was like, I was going to decline the interview if it was a man, because no offense, but if it was a man doing female fronted goddesses or whatever, that was the only time I would have felt a bit uncomfortable. But no, it was a woman, and bless her, she was a journalist herself, and she was like, I hate the name of this company. I'm moving away from it because it's just really gross. But yeah, it was eye-opening.
Yeah, I saw your article for Kerrang in 2021. They asked you, didn't they, to address this? So you've given your view on that.
Mm.
Moving on to track number 3, we don't talk about it. So one of the more technical songs, Jay would say, definitely I can hear a bit of Periphery in there as well. To me, though, this song is just all about the passion and the lyrics. Is this one of those songs where, Megan, you wrote the lyrics first and Jay, you just had to do the percussive guitar for it? How did this song come about?
So the initial riff, I mean, first off, you're right about like the Periphery influences as well. Like, I listened to them like loads in my college days and stuff. So even though I've kind of moved a little bit away from them, those roots are still like in my brain quite strongly. The initial riff, like the chorus riff and the first riff, I wrote that in like early days of COVID, like first lockdown, purely out of boredom, and that was before Cullen Culture was even out. And I think it's one of them tracks. We done this a lot for Negative Energy. We would take riffs from demos that kind of weren't working and then just kind of mix them together and bring this riff from this demo and this one from this demo, kind of try things and work. So in the end, we went about writing that track. We kind of used different riffs that had been written at different times and assembled it together to make it work.
Yeah, I can see why you've had this as track number 3, because it just carries on that momentum, doesn't it? Created by Anti-Fetish. So Megan, probably I think the fan base do probably want to dig into the lyrics on this song. It's up to you what you want to say about it. But there is one stanza that certainly stands out. I'm just going to read it out. It might be a bit weird, you hearing someone reading your lyrics back to you. But it's the part where it says, walking for miles and miles in the pouring rain, just to make sure that the bastard returns her home safe. Broken bones, heart attacks, sirens and cuffs, give the authorities all the proof they need, but there's never consequence. Is that about you, or is that a protagonist that you've created to try and express the distress of that situation?
So all lyrics are things that have happened and things that happened to me and my siblings when we were growing up. And, I wanted to keep it as vague as possible because, when you're talking about childhood trauma and childhood things, it involves a lot of other people. So I didn't want to have to like air out my whole family's traumatic experiences. But at the same time, I wanted to give enough that people could kind of tell that the things that we'd been through and I'd been through specifically were pretty fucking awful. So yeah, sadly those things did happen and they're real, and I've never been brave enough, I suppose, to talk about it before, whereas with Negative Energy and the mindset and the space we were in, I just had such a I've got nothing to lose attitude that I was like, I want to talk about it. And so that's where that track came from. It was just dipping a toe into sort of spaces and areas of my life that I never ever thought I'd be brave enough to write about. And it's sort of like my first attempt of doing that.
Yeah, such a powerful song, isn't it? And it's almost, to be honest, it doesn't even matter what genre of music you like. I think a lot of people who don't listen to heavy guitar music could probably associate with this as well and identify a certain emotion in there. So that's a standout track for me. And track number 4, we now know, don't we? You were saying off camera that Al, your bass player, he came up with the concept for track number 4, Cross My Heart, Hope to Die. How important is this on the album for you two as a standalone track?
It's definitely the track that gained us the momentum in the writing process. It got the ball rolling. Like I was saying, like we the start of the writing process was just a massive pain in the arse because everything we were coming up with, we wrote so much and deleted so much, and just kept the odd riff and stuff and write a load and then started from scratch. So Hope to Die, like the significance of it is literally that from writing that track we were able to finish the album pretty much because that gave us it gave us like a reference point to work from, and it gave us more of an idea what sound we were trying to achieve because we came up with that song and then it was kind of like, yeah, this is what we want to do. This is kind of like the vibe we want to create. So then we could base the rest of the album off of that and use it as like a guideline.
Yeah, and for me, vocally, it was so important because I'd really wanted to do like spoken word, talky kind of stuff for ages. Hadn't had the confidence to do it, whereas I could hear it in this song. I was like, this is the song to do it on. And so that broke down another wall of just me being able to feel confident enough to do things that I never would have done on the first album, and talk about things that I never would have spoken about on the first album. So yeah, it was it broke down a lot of walls for all of us, I think.
This is the point in the album where I started to hear the same, that vibe from that Korn album, Life is Peachy, which is really dark. I started to, this song, when I saw the video and it came out, I got those vibes. Obviously, it's a lot heavier than Korn's, 1990s material. There's a real sense of claustrophobia, isn't there, with this song? And how do you create those atmospherics, Jay? Are you using guitar pedals? Because you always have like a second channel, don't you, of ambience running through your music. What are you doing to create that?
Yeah, so a lot of them are octaves with just a shitload of reverb, drawing it out, like just put the mix up really high, and that's how you get that really washed out droney kind of layer. And it's something our producer Merrick, he came up with a lot of them as well. He done them with his producery skills. He came up with but they're actually, even though they're quite subtle, they're actually quite important for kind of like creating a space for riffs and stuff to slot into, as opposed to just having, just guitar, just drums, just vocals. They can put a completely different feel on stuff. Like you can have two of the same riffs but with different atmospherics over them, and the like the feel for both riffs would be completely different.
Yeah
Definitely. It is very dark song, that, and one that certainly got my attention. When we move on to track number 5, Panic Attack, Megan, I think the title just tells us everything about this song, doesn't it? I think what stands out here is how the rapid, it's almost like you're doing a death metal rap technique, which I think you've really, who else does that? There aren't many that do that. I can't think of anyone that does it like you. I mean, you're really going at it as almost like fucking Buster Rhymes or something, aren't you?
I know Phil Bozeman does it from Whitechapel, but I can't think of any others right now. I know there are other people that do it, but it is something that I just love doing. It's like my favorite vocal style to write in. But yeah, I wanted to be able to emulate and get the point across of how fucked up having a panic attack makes you feel and how stressful it is, and portray that through vocals. And I was talking to somebody last night, I had an interview last night, and she was saying she loved the album, but the only song she cannot listen to is Panic Attack because it makes her have a panic attack. And we were laughing. She was like, I can't listen to it, it's way too stressful. And I was like, I'm weirdly flattered because that's the whole point of it. It's about how you feel when you're having a panic attack, and how your brain is working at 1,000,000 miles an hour and then suddenly you crash. So yeah, it was actually a lot of fun to record. I find those ones really just easy to do. And yeah, it's a fun song. It's going to be interesting doing that live.
But I was going to say, like, what's quite ironic about it is that Willem, our drummer, probably will have a panic attack if we do it live.
Yeah.
For me, it's so funny how different we are for that section, because guitar-wise, it's really fun to play and it's not very difficult to play. But for Willem on his kicks, it's just like ridiculous to play.
It's Meshuggah style, just like non-stop mental feat. Yeah.
Yeah, I noted that down. When I first heard it, I put Meshuggah riffing with like hardcore alternative chug, picking techniques. Yeah, I can see why you'd enjoy it. Before we move on to the next track, can I just check, is this one of those songs where the lyrics came first and then you had to match Megan's rhymes and her patterns, Jay?
It actually wasn't. No, it actually wasn't on this one. We did do that on this album, like we did with Colin Culture, but that wasn't one of the tracks. Panic Attack, I remember us writing it really clearly. It came about super easily. It's one of them ones that, you know, it didn't take a lot of coming back to get it right. I'm pretty sure we done it in like one session as well. Because, you know,
Yeah.
there's structurally there's not a lot to it. It's quite simple structure. So yeah, writing it was actually like quite easy. It's just tracking it. Willem was a bit of a nightmare.
We know he's going to have a panic attack if you have to play that live. So that
Yeah.
is art imitating life, or is it the other way around? So first of all, we've got a song that's stressful and communicates
Yeah.
the message in the language of music, never mind the lyrics. And then we've got a musician in the band who would have a panic attack if he had to play it. So this is the ultimate triumph. You've really communicated that anxiety, haven't you?
Thank you. Yeah, I had to apologize to our interviewer last night, but she was really laughing. She was like, "No, it's clearly worked because I can't listen to it."
I love it. I think it's a great song. But track number 6, Lay Down Your Flowers. At this point, when I first heard this album, I was like, holy shit, there's hardly any melody on this. You are really going as dark as possible. Big departure. But I did notice what I like about it, Jay, from your point of view, there's some really technical guitar fills in there, a bit like Narcissist, you know, from the first album. This one, Lay Down Your Flowers, again. At this point, I remember when I did my review, I just said, like Venom Prison, Vexed are one of those bands where I just want to get the lyric booklet as soon as the song starts. And I don't really say that about most metal bands. It's just fascinating for me. Just as soon as I get it, it's like, okay, I mean, I can hear what you're saying, even though they're quite harsh, the vocals. But what are you writing about on this song, Megan?
So it was inspired by a few things, but it was mainly inspired by the world. How do I put it? Like end of days preppers and people who like cry wolf about the most heinous, ridiculous things, and then change the goalposts. You know, there's a lot of people that I know that will make up having certain illnesses, or you know, just like religious extremists that will say the end of the world's going to happen at the end of this week, and then it doesn't happen, and they're like, oh yeah, I got it wrong, it's actually the week after. And it was just kind of like I'd reached a point of, I cannot keep hearing you cry wolf over and over and over again. Shut the fuck up, simply. And lay down your flowers sort of is almost like me, it's like a funeral. It's me kind of saying goodbye to that part of my life. I'm not entertaining it anymore. It's almost like a funeral and a death of a loved one. Just lay down your flowers and say goodbye to that kind of era of your life, I suppose.
So do you know, we move on to track number 7. To what extent is this you revisiting your childhood? The song's called There's No Place Like Home. And I think it's very clever what you've done with the lyrics. You've almost told it like a story, haven't you? I think, did someone compared it with, not Snow White, what would it have been? I can see how they'd read into it, and they got the impression you'd retold one of these childhood stories and put something dark but subtle in there. What were you doing on this song?
So the inspiration came from The Wizard of Oz, and how Dorothy is in a nightmare and just wants to wake up and go home. And that's how I felt. This song is based on all the horrible things and realities that happen, and the things you have to do after a loved one dies. You know, obviously you have to process the grieving and the actual death of the loved one, but then very true colors start to show when somebody dies. You know, things start having more value than the person's life itself, like money and assets and inheritance and all that bullshit that I didn't expect to happen so quickly. And yeah, it was just, this song is a representation of, I just wanted my parent to come back to life, and I just wanted to just escape the nightmare and be back on my farm at home, and everything was back to normal, and I didn't have to face this reality. But sadly, that's not the case. So the only way that I could portray it without being, you know, horrifically on the nose was to portray it in a childlike way. And so The Wizard of Oz really helped with that.
Jay, do you know when Megan brings these lyrics to you? How easy, like this song? Did you bring the lyrics to Jay and he's got a guitar and starts phrasing your vocal melodies? How did this song take shape? Or are you doing this independently of each other?
We have a weird writing relationship because I'll bring something to Jay and he'll immediately know what he's going to write to it, and vice versa. I think it was you wrote something, didn't you, for this?
Yeah, I wrote like it was like the first riff or something like that. But
Mm.
it was a weird one like this one because it was really loosely written. And then we went to this is one of the ones we went to the studio to finish it off with Merrick. It was super loosely written. There were sections that were kind of missing. And then the idea of the whole Wizard of Oz thing came up, and that helped me finish the guitar for it because it gave it more of a shape. So it was a bit of both with this track, to be honest, because it was already 70% written, and then we got the concept nailed down, and then we finished it in the studio once all of our ideas was together.
What's it like for you though when you get the lyrics? I mean, there's some really distressing lyrics in here. Do you have to just divorce yourself from those while you're writing? I mean, I know you find in the mood and it comes, but what's that like from your perspective when Megan presents you some of these lyrics? And are you ever like taking a step back and thinking, "Fuck me, this is really dark."
So a lot of the specifics like lyrics and stuff will come later on once the majority of the instrumentation is written. So a lot of the time we kind of work from themes and that. But say Meg was to say she wanted to base a track around a certain theme, that a lot of the time is all it takes for me to get a rough idea of what the guitar wants to be sounding like. I mean, it's if you've got like a really angry concept, you can quite easily come up with some really aggressive guitar for it, and if there's something a bit deeper like Meg wants to write about, again, that gives me a space to write something that sounds a bit deeper, so it's not even that you need lyrics, you just need a theme to get a rough idea of where the aggression levels are going to be at, whether it's going to be a really heavy song, whether it's going to be, say like she wanted to write about a panic attack, so we did on panic attack. So obviously that's where that riff came up from, because it's fast and erratic. I'm not going to write something super slow and sludgy for that. So a lot of the time I won't see most of the lyrics until recording, but we're aware of what themes are going to be going on, and it's quite easy to base things on themes.
Yeah, and I will say, like, on behalf of the boys, like, they never ever think my lyrics are too far. Like, the boys know everything about me down to like, the most stupid things. So we know each other's lives in and out. And if I want to say something that's incredibly distressing, they're like fully supportive of it and just don't ever question it, unless it was something that they thought was terrible, and then they'll be like, make that shit, you need to rewrite it.
I doubt that happens very often. But as you were saying there about mood, I love the next song, Extremist. When I first heard this, and you're doing that guttural rap technique, and you've managed to get in a discussion about the separation between church and state, that really stood out for me. I was like, whoa. So can you tell us what encounter inspired this? I know you've already talked about televangelists and people predicting end times. Is there a story behind this where maybe you had a conversation with someone and you were just talking past each other and couldn't understand each other's point of view? What was it that inspired the song?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of covered it already. I was raised a Catholic, and my whole life I was, a dedicated believer and a devout practicing Christian. However, from a very young age, there were so many aspects of the church that I disliked and I questioned, and I wouldn't allow people to tell me things that they said were right. Like, for example, there would be preachers that would come to the church and they would tell me I'm going to burn in hell if I kiss a boy or have sex before marriage. And I'd be like, not, like, you don't get to tell me that. I've always been like a strong advocate and ally for the LGBTQ plus community. And for somebody in our community, like the church community, to be like, yeah, well, they're going to go to hell. I was just like, you know what? Fuck the lot of you. Like, I can't be associated with this anymore, because although at the time I felt like Christianity was the right thing, so much of it didn't actually correlate with what I believed in. So yeah, I've left the church now, and I no longer believe in any of that, but it was just my way of exposing the extremists and the ridiculousness of their opinions, because I believe everybody has a right to faith and a right to believe in what they want. But when they start using their religion as a weapon and a way of kind of controlling other people, that's when it's a cult. That's when it's not okay. And that was me checking out of it, really.
Yeah, it's very honourable what you do in this song. I got the impression you're saying is everyone's entitled to free speech. You even make a point of this. And I think you say, like, I'll fight for your right to say it. Where is it? Let's have a look. There is something in these lyrics, in it, where you actually say to this, like,
Yeah,
this imaginary conversation, I will fight for your right to practice or respect your
religion.
heritage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think it's everybody has the right to have freedom of religion, and I will defend anybody that wants to practice religion. But when you turn it as a way of, I don't know, condemning other people who haven't made that choice, then it's not okay. You can't say to yourself, I'm Catholic, and I don't believe that this person's gonna enter heaven, so I'm going to persecute them until the end of my life and make them feel like shit about themselves, because that's not what the religion is about. So yeah, I think everybody has a right to their own beliefs, but keep it as far as yourself. You don't need to extend it onto other people's lives and force it onto other people.
Very poignant. Yeah, another standout song, definitely. And I assume that will be in the live set as well. Although, you said you'd need to prepare for Aurora, surely, because of the rapid vocal delivery. You couldn't do this every night, could you, this song?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, these ones I don't find that difficult. What will be interesting though is the boys doing this one, because this is one where the lyrics came first and they wrote to the lyrics, and Willem didn't get the guitar or anything until the day before he recorded drums, so he was fucked from the start.
Yeah. So when we move on to track number 9, Default, technical song, this one, Jay, isn't it? I think you're playing a lot of those like double jointed grooves. I love prog metal, so when I heard this, I was thinking, yeah, this is my type of song. I think a bit of melody starts to creep in. We're at track number 9, by the way, before there is any light on this album, because it's such a claustrophobic experience, and it starts to open it up a bit here, doesn't it? What's your favorite thing about this song, Jay? Favorite feature of track number 9, Default?
Probably that intro riff, to be honest. It was very much initially it was very much just an album track for us. We really enjoyed it, but it was no one's favorite. But it's slowly kind of become, I know it's Al's favorite, and it's becoming one of my favorites. Because that first riff, I'm quite proud of it. It's a massive ball ache. It doesn't sound that difficult, but getting it clean, a massive ball ache. But no, it's just super fun. It carries itself really well. It fits the lyrical concept perfectly, I think. And hopefully at one point we can do it live. Obviously right now we're focusing on singles and stuff. But yeah, it'll be an interesting one to do live, definitely.
Well, track 10 is a single, isn't it? It's your latest video single, Trauma Euphoria. Probably the closest to the more prog metal elements of Cullen Culture on this one. I was delighted because I do want to hear your singing voice, Megan. You've really pushed yourself on the chorus for this one, haven't you? Why are there not more songs like this on the album, I guess, is my question.
In all honesty, I just didn't want to do that much singing. I prefer screaming. I prefer heavy vocals. I prefer listening to heavy vocals, but if I've got a playlist on, I don't often listen to singing in metal. If I want to hear singing, I usually listen to pop music. So for me, I just wanted to try and step away from the stereotypical screamed verse, sung chorus, and I just didn't want to do what everybody was expecting of me. You know, I love bands like Thy Art Is Murder and Immure and Alpha Wolf, and think bands that just don't ever really sing. So to try and force singing throughout the album when the topic itself is really dark and distressing, it just felt so wrong. But when it got to certain songs on the album, I was like, okay, this definitely does need some cleans. So I'm going to make them as difficult and technical as possible.
Yeah, you got to do that, haven't you, to certainly expand on the textures. So when we move on to the next song, I obviously know what this is about, and I think we should. It's mentioned in the lyric booklet. So Willem and you both lost. I don't know about Willem, grandparent, I'm assuming.
Yes, his
and
nan.
I know you lost your granddad because I remember seeing it, the post, and then my nan, I think she died 3 weeks later as well. So
I'm sorry.
And well, it happens to everyone, doesn't it? But I've got to be honest, this song really hit me. Like you said, you had an interview with that woman who couldn't listen to Panic Attack. So my dad died of a heart attack in February this year. And when I read the lyrics, you have just described exactly the process, that I've gone through. And Jay, when I saw you in Tesco on that day, apologies, I was a bit drunk. That's the day I'd found out. So it was such a strange day for me that.
Oh shit! I'm so sorry.
No, well, it's just that's why I needed to do this interview, because there were so many things, like bumping into Jay on this day when I've just been on this long countryside walk. And then obviously I know what happened with your situation. So
yeah.
Jay, you said in a previous interview you couldn't write something ignorantly heavy. And I know exactly what you mean by that. Is this too personal to play live, Megan?
No, but it would have to be a show where I feel secure enough to do it. I think this is the kind of song that we wouldn't just whack out on a support tour or a festival. This would have to be, we're with our fans who have come to see us, people that know what we've been through, and we're okay with sharing that vulnerability with them. This song has been the most difficult song I have ever written in my life, and I think the boys would agree the same. So it's incredibly special, but it is also just really, really difficult to get through, and recording it was painful.
What's it like as an artist? Because when my dad passed away, I remember thinking I couldn't write anything for 2 months. That's the last thing I want to do. When your grandfather passed away, you had to play Bloodstock, didn't you? And then you're putting out a new album. Surely, does that explain some of the writer's block? You were just emotionally bereft.
Yeah, he was still alive when we played Bloodstock. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to play it because at that point he was so close to death, and he had to have 24-hour around-the-clock care by myself, my mum, and my sister. But I didn't want to leave because I was like, he could die any second, and if I'm not here, I will never forgive myself for it. But he was such even till the end, he was so stubborn, and he was like so excited about Bloodstock for us. It actually kept him alive, and he was like, you have to go for me, you have to play for me. So the boys went up at the start of the festival. I went up on the day that we played, and I came home the day that we played, and we managed to our manager had him on FaceTime, and he watched us play on stage. And then he passed away a few days later. So he literally stayed alive to watch us play that. And that is why I was not myself throughout the whole Culling Culture campaign, because my parent had just died. And it's why it was so hard to write this album, because I didn't get chance to process or grieve him, and I was just in a completely numb, uninspired, depressed state, which is why this song is so important, because I just needed to be able to even shed just a glimmer of light of how important he was and still is to me and to us as a band. Like, the boys loved him and he loved the boys a lot as well.
Amen. Yeah, and it's great that you were able to honour him, and same for Willem. Song means a lot to him, doesn't it? Because he also suffered bereavement during that time. Yeah, thank you for that as well. Just when I saw the lyrics, it's like, fine, someone has described the way I was feeling, and it's hard, isn't it, to articulate that. So I think that alone is an incredible achievement. And then after this song, we go on to another interlude, DMT.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, what does, am I being thick here? DMT,
No,
what does the acronym mean?
That's all right. I cannot say the acronym, but
Oh,
DMT is the chemical that releases from the brain when a person dies, and it's the chemical that stops all the pain. It almost makes death pleasant and euphoric. You can take a synthetic version of it, and people, trip balls on it. But in this situation, it was almost like this is not the end, was the heavy, emotionally heavy track, and then DMT was the moment of, okay, he's gone, let's like find some peace and then move on to the last song. So yeah, it was a palate cleanser and a moment of just taking everything in that had just happened in the last song, and just find some peace, I suppose, again. But this one was mostly Jay, really.
Yeah,
I kind of like to think of it as an extension of It's Not the End, because obviously it's based around this similar sort of root notes and stuff, and it carries the same vibe, but also, without sounding like cringe or whatever, it gives space to reflect and stuff. Obviously, to a lot of people, It's Not the End is going to bring up a lot of raw emotions. So if we were to go into the next track, which is, it would be Nepotism, it's too much, because you're going from, a super deep sad song into like a super heavy groovy song. It just being like a massive like clash of feelings. Do you know what I mean? So it gives space to reflect, and just to chill for a little bit before the next song.
Yeah,
it serves the album well, doesn't it? It's I think this is one of those albums to me that I do like to listen to chronologically. And these interlude pieces, I know there's only two of them, one at the end and this, you're right, it does help you transition, doesn't it? Because when we come to the last song, obviously the fans love this, don't they? Myself included. Nepotism. Megan, which Nepo babies are you referring to on here? Are you allowed to say?
I'm going to decline referring to exactly. Maybe when we're off camera. No, it was more about things that had happened to us as a band, as opposed to particular Nepo babies. So for the last couple of years, we've worked so hard. We've been through horrific things, but we'd also been promised a lot. We'd been promised a lot by people on our team. We'd been promised a lot by other agencies and people high up in the music industry. And then it would come to the day where we thought that those things were going to be announced and happen. And it was like, oh yeah, sorry, you didn't get that anymore because we gave it to our friend. And it happened so often that we were just like, it became almost a joke, because, we got promised fucking huge tours or huge shows. And then it would be like, it would have been announced, and there was this particular band that kept having our slot. And we were like, what the fuck? Like, we were that was meant to be our slot, and people would be like, oh yeah, they're friends, sorry, like friends come first. And I was just fed up. Like, we were all really fucking fed up.
It got to a point where it was actually starting to become a little bit funny.
Yeah.
We were making jokes about it and stuff like that, because like, obviously the first few times it happens, it's frustrating, but then it gets to a point where it has like comedic effect, because we, like Meg said, we were literally, there was a lot of instances where it wasn't just like, yeah, we're going to try and do this for you. Like we were actually promised a lot of stuff, and our hopes were really high, and then suddenly it gets announced, and oh, it's not our name on the poster. That's convenient, you know. They happen to be good mates with this guy that's putting on the show, or you know, and it just popped up a lot. So yeah, it's like Meg said, like it's not we're not calling out other bands in the slightest. It's more to do with our experience and how fucked the industry actually is, like below the surface.
Yeah.
Clever lyrics though, because I think you've opened this up as a wider socio-political commentary, haven't you? That you wouldn't think you were talking about the music industry reading these lyrics. I read it as you're criticizing public institutions, politics, certainly the entertainment industry. And was this one of the first songs that you wrote for the album after, you know, you did Cross My Heart and Hope to Die? Was this one that came quickly after that?
I can't remember, was it, Jay?
I think this was, I don't know, maybe kind of mid towards maybe the end.
I think it was a middle one, yeah. But yeah, I did try and make it sort of lyrically applicable to anybody in that situation. It just, you know, happens to be that we've faced a lot of it in the music industry. I think the main point that I wanted to get across in it was the enablers of it. You know, if we're always really open about opportunities that are given to us because of our friends, for example, like Tech Fest, you know, we always get offered a slot, and we've had to work our way up. We've had to work through the smaller stages, and this year was the first time we'd ever played main stage, but we'll always get a slot offered to us because the people that run it are our friends, and we're completely open about it. What I wanted to get across was the fact that you had all these people having huge opportunities and pretending they'd worked really fucking hard for it, and it was like,
you ain't done shit.
You ain't done shit.
Well, on that note, it is a dark album, so it probably makes sense for us, doesn't it, to end the interview on a negative note for an album called Negative Energy. So I'm just going to once again say, go out and buy the album. Fantastic record. So sincere, very dark record. I mean, I like dark music anyway, so it's right up my street. Is there anything else you'd like to say to your fan base before we bring this interview to a close?
I just want to say thank you, because they waited so patiently for so long for us to you know, bring another album, and I know that wait was painful, but the fact that they were so patient and then so loving and accepting of what we came back with is just, it brings me to tears. It's ridiculous. So just thank you.
Yeah, can we just ask another thing then? So the lyrics are really dark on this. Are you okay health-wise? I am okay.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I am okay. When all the stuff was happening, I wasn't okay. But Negative Energy gave me something to wake up for, and it gave us all purpose again, and it gave us all something to look forward to. So we are all okay now. So thank you for asking.
More people need to ask that question, I think, just in general in their life as well.
Yeah,
because it can go a long way.
Yeah.
Comes through in your lyrics, that, doesn't it, being candid as well. And yeah, I think that there's going to be some people who discover this album, and it will be very important to them because they probably never had chance to have this type of conversation. That's what's glorious about music, isn't it? So I think that again is a triumph of Negative Energy. But yeah, thank you very much for doing this track by track analysis. Real honor to have you on the channel, and hope to speak to you again on album number 3, and I'll see you definitely at the London show, or perhaps even the Hertfordshire one.
Yes.
on the UK tour.
Lovely. Thanks. Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome.
Yeah.